The morning Eliza's father died, the sky had been the color of old bruises, purple and yellow and sick-looking, like the world itself was rotting from the inside out. She remembered that detail with brutal clarity because it was the last morning she'd woken up believing things could still get better. She'd been 16 then. 2 years felt like a lifetime ago. Now, standing in the suffocating heat of the Millerton auction yard, Eliza tried to breathe through the panic clawing at her throat. Sweat trickled down her spine beneath the thin cotton dress, the only decent one she owned, though decent was generous. The hem was frayed. The collar had been mended 3 times, but it was clean, and that had to count for something. Around her, men gathered like wolves circling wounded prey. "Lot 17, the auctioneer barked, his voice cutting through the afternoon haze. "Female, 18 years. Healthy. Contract term of 3 years for household labor." Household labor. The words were supposed to sound civilized, respectable even, but everyone in that yard knew what they really meant. A girl desperate enough to sign herself into indentured servitude wasn't in a position to be picky about what household actually entailed. Eliza's hands trembled. She clasped them together, squeezing until her knuckles went white. Don't shake, don't cry, don't give them the satisfaction. "Do I hear $20? The auctioneer's eyes swept the crowd with the cold efficiency of a man who'd done this too many times to care anymore. "20!" someone shouted from the back. Eliza's stomach lurched. She couldn't see who'd spoken, didn't want to. 25. 30. The bids came faster now, voices overlapping in a nauseating chorus. She kept her gaze fixed on a point somewhere above the crowd. A weathered fence post, a hawk circling overhead. Anything but the faces of the men deciding her fate. This wasn't how her life was supposed to go. 2 years ago, she'd had parents, a home. Her father had been a farmer, not a wealthy one, but proud. He'd owned 40 acres of decent land outside Millerton, enough to grow wheat and keep a small herd of cattle. Her mother had kept a garden that grew the best tomatoes in 3 counties. They'd been happy, or close enough to it. Then the drought came. Not the kind of dry spell that farmers complained about but worked through. The kind that turned fields into cracked, lifeless moonscapes. The kind that killed livestock and hope in equal measure. For 18 months, the sky refused to give them rain. The wells dried up. The crops failed. The cattle died one by one, their corpses rotting in the sun because nobody had the strength to bury them all. Her father had borrowed money. From the bank first, then from private lenders when the bank stopped answering his letters. Men with hard eyes and harder terms. Men who didn't care about drought or dead cattle or a farmer's pride. When the debt collectors finally came, her father had stood on the porch with his hunting rifle across his knees. "You'll take this land over my dead body," he'd told them. 3 days later, they found him hanging in the barn. Eliza still couldn't walk past a rope without feeling sick. Her mother had lasted another 4 months. The doctor called it pneumonia, but Eliza knew better. Her mother had died of grief, plain and simple. Just stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped fighting. One morning she didn't wake up, and Eliza had been relieved because at least the suffering was over. That left Eliza alone at 16 with a foreclosed farm, a mountain of debt she'd never agreed to, and exactly 3 options: marry someone fast, find work that didn't exist, or starve. She tried the first. Jimmy Fletcher had proposed within a week of her mother's funeral, his hands sweaty and his breath smelling like whiskey. "You need looking after," he'd said, like she was a lost dog instead of a human being. She'd said no. He'd asked twice more, getting pushier each time, until his mother pulled him aside and told him not to waste his time on that Hartwell girl with nothing to her name. She'd tried the second option too. Knocked on every door in Millerton looking for work. The general store didn't need help. The hotel wasn't hiring. The restaurant owner had looked her up and down with an expression that made her skin crawl, then offered her a job entertaining customers upstairs. She'd walked out before he finished explaining. That left option 3, starvation, or this, the auction block. $45! A big man with a salt and pepper beard raised his hand, grinning like he'd just won something. Eliza's throat tightened. She recognized him. Dutch Kellerman, owned a ranch 15 miles south of town. She'd heard stories about Dutch. His last housekeeper had run off in the middle of the night, walking barefoot through 6 miles of wilderness rather than stay another day under his roof. 45 going once, 50. The voice came from somewhere to her left, quiet but carrying weight. The crowd shifted, murmuring. Eliza risked a glance. The man stood apart from the others, leaning against a fence post with his arms crossed. Tall, maybe 6 feet, broad-shouldered in the way of men who worked with their hands. He wore plain clothes, brown trousers, a faded blue shirt, a hat pulled low enough to shadow his face. But even from a distance, Eliza could feel something different about him. The other men looked at her like she was meat. This one barely looked at her at all. 55, Dutch called out, irritation creeping into his voice. 60, the quiet man said. The auctioneer's eyebrows rose. $60. Do I hear 65? Dutch scowled but shook his head. $60 was serious money for 3 years of labor, more than most women in her position would fetch. 60 going once, going twice. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Eliza held her breath. The gavel came down with a crack that seemed to echo off the mountains. Sold to Wade Mercer of Blackstone Ridge for $60. A ripple went through the crowd. Surprise, wariness, something else she couldn't identify. The name meant nothing to Eliza, but clearly it meant something to them. Wade Mercer stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dry earth. Up close, Eliza could finally see his face. Weathered, hard, maybe 35, maybe 40. The frontier aged people fast. His jaw was covered in dark stubble, his eyes a pale gray that looked almost colorless in the harsh sunlight. Tired eyes, sad eyes, dangerous eyes. Come on then, he said. Not unkind, but not warm either, like he was talking to a horse he'd just purchased. Which, Eliza supposed, wasn't far from the truth. She followed him through the crowd, acutely aware of every stare, every whisper. Her face burned with humiliation. This morning, she'd been a free woman. Now she was property. Mercer's wagon waited at the edge of the yard, a sturdy flatbed loaded with supplies. Salt, flour, nails, rope. The practical purchases of a man who lived far from town and couldn't afford to make trips often. You got belongings? He asked. One bag. Eliza pointed to the small canvas sack she'd left near the auction platform. He retrieved it without comment, tossing it into the wagon bed with less care than he'd probably give a sack of grain. Then he climbed onto the driver's seat and gestured for her to join him. Eliza hesitated. This was it. The moment where her old life ended and something new, something unknown, began. Blackstone Ridge is a 4-hour ride, Mercer said flatly. Sun sets in 5. You can stand there working up courage, or you can get in. Your choice. His tone suggested it wasn't really a choice at all. Eliza climbed up, arranging her skirt as modestly as possible. The seat was hard wood, sun-warmed and uncomfortable. Mercer clicked his tongue and the horses started moving, pulling them away from Millerton and everything familiar. They rode in silence for the first hour. The landscape changed gradually, rolling grasslands giving way to rougher country, hills covered in scrub pine and granite outcroppings. The road, such as it was, barely deserved the name, more like a suggestion of a path worn into the earth by wagon wheels and cattle drives. Eliza snuck glances at her new, owner? Employer? The contract called him her sponsor, which was just a prettier word for the same ugly thing. His hands on the reins were scarred, knuckles thick and calloused. A working man's hands. His jaw stayed clenched, like he was chewing on thoughts too bitter to spit out. You got questions, he said finally, still not looking at her. Ask them now. Eliza swallowed. What happened to your last housekeeper? Quit. Why? Same reason they all quit. He paused. My kids. That surprised her. She hadn't thought about him having children. How many? 2, twins, boy and girl. They're 8. 8, young enough to need care, old enough to be trouble. And their mother? Dead? The word came out flat, final, allowing no follow-up questions. But Eliza pushed anyway. She had a right to know what she was walking into. How long ago? 2 years? Mercer's jaw tightened further, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble. Fever took her. Took her fast. I'm sorry. He didn't respond. The silence stretched out again, heavier this time. Eliza watched the landscape roll past and tried not to think about what waited at the end of this journey. 2 children who'd chased off multiple housekeepers.
A widowed rancher who looked like he'd forgotten how to smile. A place called Blackstone Ridge that made people whisper and look uncomfortable. Why'd you buy my contract? The question came out before she could stop it. Mercer finally glanced at her, just a quick sideways look. You were the only one there who didn't look angry. What? The other girls at the auction. They looked angry, bitter. Can't blame them. He turned his attention back to the road. But anger doesn't help anything, just makes it worse. You looked scared, sure, ashamed, but not angry. I got enough anger in my house already. Eliza didn't know what to say to that. It was probably the most honest thing anyone had said to her in months. What's expected of me? She asked. Cooking, cleaning, looking after the kids, basic ranch work if I need extra hands, but mostly, you'll be in the house. He paused. I'm not going to hurt you, if that's what you're worried about. The way he said it, awkward, like the words didn't fit right in his mouth, made her believe him, or want to believe him anyway. The contract says 3 years, Eliza said quietly. It does. And then? Then you're free. I'll give you your wages. You can go wherever you want. 3 years. It felt like a lifetime. But it was better than starving, better than Dutch Kellerman's ranch, better than Jimmy Fletcher's sweaty hands. Maybe. The sun was sinking toward the horizon when they finally reached Blackstone Ridge. The ranch sat in a valley surrounded by pine-covered hills, a creek running along the eastern edge. The house was larger than Eliza expected. 2 stories, log construction, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Solid, well-built, but neglected. Weeds grew tall around the foundation. One of the porch steps had cracked straight through, paint peeled from the shutters. Behind the house stood a barn, a chicken coop, a few smaller outbuildings. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, their shapes dark against the failing light. It could have been beautiful. Should have been beautiful. Instead, it just looked lonely. Mercer brought the wagon to a stop near the house. Come on, I'll introduce you to Clara and Ben. Eliza climbed down, her legs stiff from the long ride. She followed Mercer up the sagging porch steps, carefully avoiding the cracked one, and through the front door. The inside of the house matched the outside. Good bones, bad maintenance. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space all in one. An iron stove dominated one corner. A rough-hewn table with mismatched chairs sat in the center. Dirty dishes were piled in a wash basin. The floor needed sweeping, the windows needed washing, everything needed something. Pa? A small voice came from the doorway to the left. Eliza turned. The girl stood there, all sharp angles and suspicious eyes. Dark hair and 2 messy braids. A dress that might have fit her last year but was too small now. Her brother appeared behind her, identical in almost every way except that his hair was shorter and his suspicion somehow sharper. This is Miss Hartwell, Mercer said. She's going to be staying with us, helping around the house. Clara looked Eliza up and down with the brutal honesty only children possessed. You're skinny, Clara, Mercer warned. She is, though, skinnier than the last one. The last one was mean, Ben added helpfully. She wasn't mean, Mercer said. She was just firm. She was mean, both children said in unison. Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the exhaustion, Eliza felt her lips twitch. How many housekeepers have you had? Counting you? Clara tilted her head, calculating. 6. 5, Ben corrected. Mrs. Patterson doesn't count. She only lasted 2 days. What happened to Mrs. Patterson? Eliza asked. The twins exchanged a look. The kind of look that siblings share when they've done something they probably shouldn't have but don't exactly regret. Snakes, Clara said simply. In her bed, Ben added. Mercer closed his eyes briefly, like a man praying for patience he didn't have. Garter snakes, harmless. She didn't think so, Clara said. She screamed loud enough to spook the horses. Eliza should have been horrified, should have been calculating how quickly she could pack that canvas bag and start walking back to Millerton. But something about the twins' expressions, defiant and guilty and testing her all at once, made her pause. They'd lost their mother. Their father had withdrawn into grief, and every adult who came into their lives kept leaving. Snakes in the bed started to make a certain kind of sense. Well, Eliza said carefully, I'm not particularly fond of snakes, but I grew up on a farm, saw plenty of them. I suppose if I found one in my bed,
I'd just put it outside and get on with my day. The twins stared at her. You wouldn't scream? Ben asked, sounding almost disappointed. I might yelp a little, Eliza admitted. But no, probably not scream. Clara's eyes narrowed. We'll see.
Clara, Ben. Mercer's voice carried a warning. That's enough. Show Miss Hartwell to the spare room. Help her get settled. It's just Eliza, she said quickly. Miss Hartwell sounds old, formal, like someone's governess. Eliza, then, Mercer agreed. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, he just nodded and headed back outside, probably to tend to the horses. The twins led Eliza up a narrow staircase to the second floor. 4 doors opened off the hallway. Clara pointed to each one in turn. Pa's room, our room, storage, your room. The spare room was small but clean, cleaner than the rest of the house anyway. A narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a window overlooking the creek. The previous housekeepers must have slept here. Eliza wondered what they'd thought about, lying in this bed at night. Whether they'd planned their escapes. Whether they'd cried. Supper's at 6, Clara announced. Pa makes bacon and beans most nights. Sometimes just beans. Can you cook? Ben asked, his tone suggesting he highly doubted it. I can, Eliza said. My mother taught me. Where's your mother now? The question was innocent, just a child's curiosity, but it still hit like a fist to the chest. She died. Both my parents did. The twins went quiet. They understood death in a way most 8-year-olds didn't have to. That's why you were at the auction, Clara said. Not a question, a statement of fact. Yes. Do you hate it here already? Ben asked. Eliza sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I don't know yet. Ask me in a week. Clara studied her for a long moment. The others always said no real fast, even when you could tell they were lying. I don't like lying, Eliza said. Seems like a waste of energy. That earned her another of those twin looks. Silent communication she couldn't quite decode. We'll let you unpack, Clara finally said. She grabbed her brother's arm and dragged him toward the door. But before leaving, she turned back. Just so you know, we're really good at making people leave. So if you're already thinking about it, you might as well go now. Save everyone the trouble. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Eliza stared at it for a moment, then looked around the small room that was somehow now hers. Or not hers exactly. Nothing was hers anymore. Everything belonged to Wade Mercer for the next 3 years. Her canvas bag sat on the floor where Ben had dropped it. She unpacked slowly, methodically. 2 spare dresses, clean undergarments. Her mother's hairbrush, the silver plate worn down to brass. A small leather-bound Bible her father had given her for her 13th birthday. She didn't read it anymore, but couldn't bring herself to leave it behind. A photograph in a cracked frame. Her parents on their wedding day, young and hopeful and completely unaware of how hard life was going to get. She set the photograph on the chest of drawers, then immediately turned it face down. Looking at it hurt too much. Through the window, she could see Wade working in the barn, his movements efficient and practiced. The twins had disappeared somewhere, probably scheming. The sun finished its descent below the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow she'd start her new life as a bought woman on a broken ranch with a grieving widower and 2 children who specialized in psychological warfare. Tonight, she was just going to survive. Eliza woke before dawn the next morning, habit older than thought pulling her from sleep. On the farm, her father had always said that the day started when the rooster crowed, and if you weren't up by then, you were already behind. The house was silent. She dressed quickly in the dim light, braided her hair, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was a disaster, even worse than she'd realized last night. Dishes from what looked like several days crusted in the wash basin, food scraps scattered across the counter, the floor sticky beneath her feet. She found an apron hanging on a peg near the door, faded gingham that had probably belonged to Wade's wife. It felt strange wearing another woman's apron, like putting on her ghost. But Eliza didn't have one of her own, and standing around feeling awkward wasn't going to get the work done. She started with the dishes, heating water on the stove and scrubbing away layers of neglect. Then the counters. Then the floor, which required 3 separate bucket refills before the water stopped coming up brown. The sun was just starting to lighten the sky when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Wade appeared, already dressed for work, looking surprised to find her in the kitchen. "Didn't think you'd be up yet," he said. "I'm used to early mornings." He grunted, moving to the stove to start coffee. Eliza watched him work. Economical movements, no wasted effort. He was a man who'd been taking care of himself for a long time. "I can do that," she offered. "Can you?" "Yes." He stepped aside, not quite reluctantly, but not eagerly either, like he wasn't sure if accepting help made him weak or smart. Eliza measured coffee grounds, added water, set the pot on the stove. While it heated, she explored the pantry. Supplies were low but not desperate. Flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, a few withered potatoes, some eggs, probably from the chickens she'd heard clucking outside. "How do you like your eggs?" she asked. Wade looked at her like she'd asked him to explain calculus. "Cooked." "That's not really an answer. It's the only one I got. I haven't thought about how I like eggs in 2 years. I just eat them because a man's got to eat." "Fair enough." Eliza scrambled the eggs with some salt pork, made a simple pan bread from cornmeal and flour. Nothing fancy. But it was hot, and it was ready by the time the twins stumbled downstairs looking sleep-rumpled and suspicious. They stared at the food on the table like it might bite them. "Sit," Wade ordered. "Eat." They sat, they ate, but their eyes never left Eliza. "It's not poisoned," she said mildly. "Didn't say it was," Clara shot back. "You're thinking it, though." Ben snickered despite himself. The meal passed in relative silence. Wade shoveled food into his mouth with the grim efficiency of a man fueling himself for hard labor. The twins picked at their portions, eating more than they wanted to admit while pretending they weren't impressed. When Wade finished, he stood, grabbing his hat from the peg by the door. "I'll be working the north fence line today. Won't be back till supper. Kids have chores. You need something. Clara can show you where things are." "Wait," Eliza said. "What do you want me to do?" He paused, like the question confused him. "Whatever needs doing. You'll figure it out." And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that suggested he was grateful to escape the awkwardness of having a stranger in his house. Eliza looked at the twins. The twins looked at her. "So," she said, "what are these chores your father mentioned?" Clara crossed her arms. "We feed the chickens, collect eggs, pull weeds in the garden. Ben hauls water from the creek. I help with the washing sometimes." "Sounds reasonable. Let's get started then." "You're going to help us?" Ben sounded genuinely shocked. "Unless you'd rather I stand here watching you work." Another one of those twin looks. "Fine," Clara said slowly. "But don't blame us if you can't keep up." The morning became a test. Eliza understood that immediately. The twins did their chores at a punishing pace, constantly glancing back to see if she was struggling. She helped Ben carry water buckets that were almost too heavy for him to manage alone. She got down on her knees in the garden next to Clara, pulling weeds until her back ached. She reached into the chicken coop for eggs, despite 2 hens that seemed personally offended by her existence. By midday, she was sweating, sore, and fairly certain she'd made an enemy of every chicken on the property. But she hadn't complained, hadn't quit, hadn't even slowed down. The twins, grudgingly, seemed to notice. "You want lunch?" Clara asked as they trooped back into the house. "I could eat. You?" Clara shrugged. "I guess." They assembled a meal from leftovers, cold pan bread, some jerky, water from the pump. Nothing fancy, but it filled the hollow space in Eliza's stomach. "Why'd your parents die?" Ben asked suddenly. "Ben!" Clara elbowed him hard. "What? You wanted to know too?" Eliza set down her cup. "It's all right. My father, he took his own life after we lost the farm. My mother died a few months later, got sick, and didn't fight it." The twins processed this information with the seriousness it deserved. "Our mother got sick too," Clara said quietly. "It happened really fast. One day she was fine. 3 days later, she was gone." "Pa wouldn't let us see her at the end," Ben added. "Said we should remember her healthy." "Do you?" Eliza asked gently. "Remember her healthy?" Clara's face crumpled slightly before she caught herself. "Sometimes, but it's getting harder." 2 years. These children had been without a mother for 2 years, and their father had withdrawn so far into his own grief that he barely functioned beyond survival. "What was she like?" Eliza asked. The twins looked at each other, then at her, testing whether this was some kind of trap. "She sang," Ben finally said. All the time, even when she was doing boring stuff like washing dishes. She told stories, Clara added, made-up ones, about princesses and dragons and knights. Ben always wanted to be the knight. I wanted to be the dragon. Despite everything, Eliza smiled. Dragons are better anyway. That's what Mama said. They talked more after that. Carefully at first, then with increasing confidence. About their mother, their father, the ranch, the long string of housekeepers they'd tormented. Mrs. Chen had lasted 3 weeks before the twins accidentally left the gate open and all the pigs got into her vegetable garden. Mrs. Rodriguez made it almost 2 months before she caught them reading her private letters. We're not supposed to be proud of that, Claire admitted. But we kind of are. Why do you do it? Eliza asked. Run them off, I mean. The twins went quiet. Because they're not Mama, Ben said finally. And we're tired of pretending they could be. The simple, brutal honesty of it broke something in Eliza's chest. These weren't bad kids. They were scared, grieving children who'd learned that attachment meant pain. So better to push people away first before they inevitably left anyway. I'm not going to pretend to be your mother, Eliza said. I couldn't even if I wanted to. But I'm here and I'll stay as long as your father needs me to. And if you want to make that easier or harder, that's your choice. I'm not going to force you to like me. Clara studied her with those sharp, assessing eyes. The others always tried to make us like them, made it into this big thing. Well, I'm not the others. No, Clara agreed. You're really not. The afternoon passed in a kind of truce. Eliza tackled the disaster that was the main room, while the twins did whatever mysterious things 8-year-olds did when left to their own devices. She swept, scrubbed, organized, found a dead mouse behind the flour barrel, discovered that 3 of the kitchen drawers stuck because someone, probably a previous housekeeper in a fit of frustration, had jammed them full of random items that had no business being in drawers. By the time Wade's figure appeared in the distance, walking back from wherever the north fence line was, Eliza had transformed the kitchen into something approaching functional. The twins materialized from outside, drawn by the sound of their father's boots on the porch. Wade stopped in the doorway, looking around the room with an expression Eliza couldn't quite read. It's clean, he said, like he wasn't entirely sure it was real. That's generally what happens when someone cleans it, Eliza replied, then immediately regretted the tart tone. This man owned her contract. Sass probably wasn't smart, but Wade just made a sound that might have been a laugh if he remembered how. Fair enough. Supper was another simple meal, beans and cornbread, coffee for Wade, milk for the twins. They ate at the clean table in the clean kitchen, and if the silence was still awkward, at least it was slightly less hostile than breakfast. After the meal, Wade surprised everyone by actually sitting in the main room instead of disappearing outside to work until full dark. He pulled out a knife and a piece of wood, whittling by lamplight while the twins played some complicated game with stones and string. Eliza washed the dishes, her hands moving automatically while her mind wandered. 1 day down, 1,094 to go, give or take. It felt both impossible and inevitable. You survived day 1, Clara announced, appearing at Eliza's elbow with the stealth of a cat. That's better than Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson only lasted 2 days, though, so technically I haven't beaten her yet. Clara grinned, quick and fierce and surprised at herself for doing it. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow, Eliza agreed. That night, lying in the narrow bed in the spare room, Eliza listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, creek water rushing over stones, wind in the pines, the house settling around her, Wade's heavy footsteps in his room across the hall, the twins whispering to each other before finally falling silent. She thought about her parents, about the farm that was gone forever, about standing on that auction block, humiliated and terrified and certain her life was over. Maybe it was. Or maybe, just maybe, it was starting. 3 weeks into her contract, Eliza realized the twins had been testing her the entire time, not with dramatic acts of sabotage, but with smaller, more calculated provocations designed to find her breaking point. The salt mysteriously disappeared from the pantry. Her hairbrush ended up in the chicken coop. Someone, and both children swore ignorance with identical innocent faces, had tied knots in all her apron strings so tight she had to cut them loose. Small annoyances. Nothing catastrophic. Just enough to see how she'd react. She didn't. Not the way they expected, anyway. When the salt vanished, she shrugged and cooked with herbs she found growing wild near the creek. When her hairbrush turned up covered in chicken droppings, she washed it off and kept using it. The knotted apron strings got her to laugh, actually laugh, because the sheer pettiness of it was almost impressive. "You two put a lot of effort into being difficult," she'd said, sitting at the kitchen table working the knots loose with a knife. "Imagine what you could accomplish if you used that energy for something useful." Clara had looked offended. Ben had looked thoughtful. The pranks continued, but they got less frequent, less vicious. The house, meanwhile, was slowly becoming livable again. Eliza worked through it room by room, cleaning years of accumulated neglect, mending what could be mended, making lists of what couldn't. The main room looked almost welcoming now. The windows were clean enough to actually see through. The floors no longer stuck to your boots. Wade noticed, though he didn't say much. He wasn't a man who wasted words, but sometimes she'd catch him pausing in a doorway, looking around like he was seeing his own house for the first time in years. Once, she found him running his hand along the kitchen counter she'd scrubbed for an hour to get the grime off, his expression distant and unreadable. "Sarah kept it like this," he said quietly, not looking at Eliza. "Before. When she was—" He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Just kept kneading the bread dough in front of her, giving him space to have whatever moment he was having. He left without another word, but something had shifted. Some small acknowledgement that she was doing more than just fulfilling a contract. She was bringing his house back to life. The town, however, was a different story. Eliza's first trip to Millerton came on a Saturday morning when Wade announced they needed supplies, and she should come along to learn the route. The twins stayed home. "Someone's got to watch the ranch," Ben had said importantly, like 8-year-olds were capable of defending property from marauders. The wagon ride took 2 hours, and Wade spent most of it in his usual silence. Eliza had stopped trying to force conversation. If the man wanted to sit with his thoughts, that was his business. Millerton looked different from this side of the auction. Smaller, shabbier. The kind of town that had seen better days and was now just hanging on out of stubbornness. The general store sat at the corner of what passed for a main street, its paint peeling and its sign crooked. Wade tied the horses and headed inside. Eliza followed, suddenly self-conscious in her worn dress and sun-darkened skin. The store was dim and cramped, shelves stocked with the practical supplies frontier life demanded. Flour, sugar, coffee, fabric, nails, rope. A woman stood behind the counter, middle-aged, thin-lipped, with eyes that cataloged everything. "Wade," she said, her tone neutral. Then those eyes landed on Eliza. "This her?" "This is Miss Hartwell," Wade said. "She's helping out at the ranch." The woman's lips pressed thinner. "I'm sure she is." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Eliza felt her face burn. "Mrs. Garrett," Wade said, his voice dropping into something harder. "I need 30 pounds of flour, 20 of sugar, salt, coffee, and whatever dried fruit you got." Mrs. Garrett kept staring at Eliza for another long moment, before finally turning to gather the supplies. "You're the auction girl," she said, not bothering to make it sound like a question. "Heard Dutch Kellerman was mighty disappointed you went to Wade instead." "I'm sure Dutch survived," Eliza said quietly. I'm sure he did." Mrs. Garrett set a bag of flour on the counter with more force than necessary. "Though I hear he's still looking for help, if things don't work out at Blackstone Ridge." The threat was subtle but clear. "You're replaceable. You're disposable. You're nothing." Wade stepped closer to the counter, his presence suddenly taking up more space. "Mrs. Garrett, I don't recall asking for your opinions on my household arrangements. Just the supplies, please." The woman's mouth tightened, but she finished gathering their order in silence. Wade paid, loaded everything into the wagon, and they left without further conversation. Back on the wagon seat, Eliza stared at her hands. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For that. The way she looked at me, talked to me. It reflects badly on you." Wade made a dismissive sound. "Harriet Garrett's been a busybody since before I was born. She don't like anything that ain't exactly how she thinks it should be. You could be a saint, and she'd find fault. Still, I'm the auction girl. That's all anyone's going to see." "Then they're fools." He clicked his tongue, and the horses started moving. "You work hard. You don't complain.
You're good with my kids, even when they're being devils. That's what matters. Rest is just noise.
It was maybe the longest string of compliments Wade had ever given anyone, and Eliza didn't quite know what to do with it. "Thank you," she managed. He grunted, which she'd learned was Wade's default response when emotions threatened to surface. They made one more stop before leaving town, the post office, where Wade collected a few letters and a newspaper. Eliza waited in the wagon, watching people move through the street. Women in bonnets whispering to each other, men tipping their hats to neighbors. Normal life. The kind she used to have. A figure detached from the shadows near the saloon, walking toward the wagon with deliberate steps. Dutch Kellerman. He was bigger up close than he'd seemed at the auction. Not fat, exactly, but large. Thick arms and a belly that suggested he ate well while others went hungry. His beard was still that same salt and pepper, his eyes small and mean. "Well now," he said, stopping next to the wagon, "if it ain't Wade Mercer's new girl." Eliza's throat tightened. "I'm helping out at his ranch." "That what you call it?" Dutch grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "Helping out? That's real nice. Real polite."
"Is there something you want, Dutch?" Wade's voice came from behind, cold enough to freeze water. Dutch didn't turn around, kept his eyes on Eliza. Just being neighborly, making sure the girl knows she's got options if things get difficult. "Things are fine," Eliza said firmly.
"Are they?" Dutch finally looked at Wade, his grin widening.
"Heard you've been through 6 housekeepers in 2 years. Them kids of yours run off every woman you bring home. Makes a man wonder what really goes on at Blackstone Ridge." Wade's jaw clenched so hard Eliza could see the muscle jump. "You wondering about something specific, Dutch? Or you just here to spread manure?"
"I'm just saying," Dutch held up his hands in mock innocence. "A young woman in a vulnerable position might appreciate knowing there's other places she could work. Places where she'd be, appreciated." The way he said appreciated made Eliza's skin crawl. "I'm not interested," she said. "You sure about that?" "Wade's a hard man, silent type. Never knows what he's thinking. That's a lonely way to live, especially for a pretty thing like you." "Dutch!" Wade's voice dropped into something dangerous. "Walk away. Now." For a moment, Eliza thought Dutch might push it, might say something that would force Wade to back up his words with action. But Dutch just laughed, shook his head, and stepped back. "Offer stands," he said, looking at Eliza again. "You change your mind, you know where to find me." He sauntered off, back toward the saloon, leaving tension crackling in his wake. Wade climbed onto the wagon seat, his movement sharp with barely controlled anger. "He bothers you again, you tell me." "He didn't really do anything. He bothered you. That's enough." Wade picked up the reins, then paused. Dutch Kellerman is the kind of man who sees everything as something he can own or break. You stay away from him. Eliza nodded, unsettled by the intensity in Wade's voice. She'd seen him quiet, tired, grieving, but never angry like this, never protective. The ride home was silent again, but different this time, charged. Wade's hands were tight on the reins, his jaw still clenched. Eliza kept replaying the encounter, Dutch's words, the implications underneath them. She'd been bought once. That was bad enough. The idea that another man was already circling, waiting for her to fail, ready to scoop her up like salvage, it made her feel sick. The twins were waiting on the porch when they got back, and the sight of them, Clara with her messy braids and Ben with his untucked shirt, grounded something in Eliza. This was real. The ranch, the work, Wade's quiet presence, the children's grudging acceptance. This was solid in a way the rest of her life hadn't been since her parents died. She wasn't going to let Dutch Kellerman or anyone else take it from her. The following week brought the first real test. It started with the chickens. Eliza went out one morning to collect eggs and found the coop door open, 3 hens missing. She tracked their scattered feathers to the tree line, where something, fox probably or coyote, had gotten them during the night. Wade took the news with his usual stoicism. It happens. That's why we keep extra. But it bothered Eliza more than it should have. She'd started to think of those chickens as hers in a way. Stupid birds that pecked at her and made collecting eggs an adventure, but hers nonetheless. Then the well started acting up. The bucket came up cloudy, tasting of minerals and something vaguely rotten. Wade had to spend an entire day lowering himself down to clear whatever had gotten lodged in the mechanism. He came up soaked and irritable, and supper that night was tense. After that, it was the garden. Some kind of beetle infestation that Clara discovered, the insects stripping the potato plants faster than Eliza could pick them off. She spent hours crouched in the dirt, her hands cramping, trying to save what she could. "It's just bad luck," Wade said when she complained about it. "Frontier life. Sometimes everything goes wrong at once." But Eliza wasn't convinced it was just luck. Call it intuition or paranoia or the scars of growing up poor, but something felt off. Deliberate. She didn't say anything, though. What was she going to accuse someone of? Sabotaging chickens? Cursing the well? It sounded ridiculous even in her own head. The answer came 2 weeks later, delivered by a neighbor Eliza had never met. His name was Tom Crawford, and he owned the ranch adjacent to Wade's property. He showed up one evening just as supper was finishing, riding a tired-looking mare and carrying a burlap sack. "Wade," he said, dismounting stiffly. "Got a minute?" "Always got a minute for you, Tom. Come on in. You eatin'?" Tom declined food, but accepted coffee, sitting at the table while the twins eyed him with curiosity. He was probably 60, weathered in the way of men who'd spent decades fighting the land for survival, but his eyes were kind. "Found something you should see," Tom said, reaching into the sack. He pulled out what looked like a chunk of wood, setting it on the table. "Pulled this out of Blackstone Creek yesterday, just upstream from your property." Wade picked it up, turning it over in his hands. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Eliza asked. "Copper sulfate," Wade said grimly. "Someone dumped a whole mess of it in the creek." Tom nodded. "Enough to contaminate your well, kill your fish, sicken your cattle if they drank from the lower pools. Lucky I spotted it when I did, got most of it cleared out." Eliza felt cold. "Who would do that?" The two men exchanged a look. "Could be anyone," Tom said carefully. "Frontier's got its share of folks who'd rather see their neighbors fail than succeed themselves." But Wade's jaw was tight, and Eliza remembered Dutch Kellerman's smile, the way he'd looked at her, the offer that wasn't really an offer. "I'll handle it," Wade said, his voice flat. "Don't do anything stupid," Tom warned. "I'm just telling you so you know to watch your back. Last thing you need is trouble." After Tom left, Wade sat at the table for a long time, staring at the chunk of copper sulfate like it personally offended him. "Pa?" Clara ventured quietly. "Is someone trying to hurt us?" "No." Wade set the contaminated wood aside. "Someone's trying to prove a point. There's a difference." "What point?" Ben asked. Wade looked at Eliza then, and she understood. The point was her. The point was that Wade had rejected Dutch's supremacy by outbidding him at the auction. The point was that some men couldn't stand losing, especially to someone they considered weak. "The point," Wade said carefully, "is that some people need to learn to mind their own business." He stood, grabbed his hat, and walked out into the darkening evening. Eliza followed him to the porch. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing tonight. But tomorrow I'm riding to Dutch's place, having a conversation." "That sounds like a good way to get shot." Wade almost smiled. Almost. "Dutch won't shoot me. He's mean, but he ain't stupid. Killing a neighbor brings the law, and he don't want that attention." "What if you're wrong?" He turned to look at her fully then, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You worried about me." "I'm worried about what happens to me and the twins if you get yourself killed over contaminated well water." It was a practical answer, a safe answer, and they both knew it was only half true. "I'll be careful," Wade said, "but this ends tomorrow, one way or another." He left before dawn, riding out while frost still clung to the grass. Eliza watched from the kitchen window, coffee growing cold in her hands, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The twins were subdued that morning, doing their chores without complaint. Even they understood the weight of what was happening. Clara stayed close to Eliza, hovering in the kitchen while bread baked. Ben checked the horizon every 10 minutes, watching for his father's return. "He's going to be fine," Eliza said, trying to sound confident. "You don't know that," Clara replied, her voice small. And she was right. Eliza didn't know, couldn't know. All she could do was keep working, keep moving, keep the children occupied so they wouldn't spiral into fear. Wade returned just after noon, his horse lathered and his expression grim, but he was whole, unshot, alive. Relief hit Eliza so hard she had to grip the counter to stay upright.
How'd it go? She asked when he came inside.
It went. Wade hung his hat, rolled his shoulders like they ached. Dutch denied everything, called me paranoid, said I was seeing enemies where there weren't any. You don't believe him. Not even a little bit. Wade met her eyes. But he knows I know. And he knows Tom's watching. That'll keep him in line for a while. And if it doesn't? Wade's expression hardened. Then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. It wasn't exactly reassuring, but it was honest. Eliza appreciated that more than false promises. Life settled back into its rhythm after that. The well cleared, the remaining chickens stayed secure in their coop, which Wade reinforced with new wire. The garden recovered, producing enough vegetables to make Eliza's meals substantially better than the beans and bacon rotation Wade had been living on. The twins continued their campaign of minor chaos, but it felt different now. Less hostile. More like they were testing boundaries than trying to destroy her completely. One afternoon, while Eliza was mending one of Clara's dresses, the girl went through clothes like a soldier through ammunition. Ben appeared at her elbow. "Can you teach me to read better?" he asked abruptly. Eliza looked up, surprised. "You already know how to read." "I know the words, but Clara reads faster. I want to be faster too." It was the first time either twin had asked her for something that wasn't a demand or a challenge, just a simple request from a child who wanted to improve himself. "Of course," Eliza said. "We can practice after chores. Do you have books?" Ben's face fell. "We had some, but Pa put them away after Mama died. Said it hurt too much to see them." The casual tragedy of it, a grieving father so destroyed by loss that he'd hidden his children's books, made Eliza's chest tight. "I'll talk to your father," she said. "See if we can get them back out." That evening, after the twins were asleep and the dishes were clean, Eliza found Wade on the porch. He sat in an old rocking chair that creaked with every movement, staring out at the darkness. "Ben asked me to help him read better," she said, joining him. Wade nodded slowly. He always struggled with it. Clara took to reading like a duck to water. Ben had to work harder. "He mentioned you put the books away." Wade's rocking stopped. "I did." "He wants them back." Silence stretched between them, broken only by crickets and the distant sound of the creek. "Sarah used to read to them every night," Wade said finally. "She'd do different voices for all the characters. Make the kids laugh until they couldn't breathe. After she died, I tried to keep it going. Made it 3 nights before I broke down in the middle of a story about a rabbit. Kids just stared at me while I sat there crying like a child myself." He said it matter-of-factly, but Eliza heard the shame underneath, the belief that he'd failed his children by being human. "They were 6, Wade continued, too young to understand why their father was falling apart. So I packed up the books. Told myself it was temporary, that I'd get them back out when I was stronger." He laughed, bitter. 2 years later, they're still in boxes in the storage room. "Maybe it's time," Eliza said quietly. "Maybe." He started rocking again. "You'd have to be the one reading to them. I still can't." "I can do that." Wade looked at her then, really looked at her. "You're good with them, better than I thought anyone could be after how they treated the others. They're good kids. They were just scared." "Doesn't excuse how they acted." "No," Eliza agreed, "but it explains it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Or not comfortable exactly, but not unbearable either. The kind of quiet that existed between two people who were learning each other's rhythms. "Why'd you really buy my contract?" Eliza asked. "And don't say it's because I wasn't angry. There's more to it than that." Wade took his time answering, rocking slowly, choosing his words with care. "After Sarah died, people expected me to fall apart. Sell the ranch, move back east, give up. And part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to burn it all down and walk away." He paused. "But I got 2 kids depending on me, so I kept going, kept fighting, kept hiring housekeepers who'd last a few weeks before my kids scared them off, or they decided frontier life wasn't worth the trouble." He turned to look at Eliza directly. "Then I saw you on that auction block, terrified, humiliated, but standing there anyway because giving up wasn't an option, and I thought—" He stopped, started again. "I thought maybe someone who'd already lost everything might understand what it's like here. Might be tough enough to stay." "That's a lot of assumptions to make about a stranger," Eliza said. "I know, but I was right, wasn't I?" She wanted to argue. wanted to point out that she'd had no choice, that staying at Blackstone Ridge wasn't bravery but necessity. But the truth was more complicated than that. She could have run. Other housekeepers had. But something about this broken ranch and its broken family had hooked itself into her chest, and she couldn't quite bring herself to leave. "I'm not some frontier hero," she said. "I'm just trying to survive." "That's all any of us are doing," Wade replied. "The ones who survive longest are the ones who figure out survival doesn't have to be lonely." It was maybe the most profound thing Eliza had heard him say, and she didn't quite know how to respond. So she just sat with him in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, and let the words settle between them like seeds planted in good soil. The books came down the next day. Wade hauled 3 boxes from the storage room, setting them in the main room with a finality that suggested he'd made his peace with whatever ghosts lived inside. The twins descended on them like treasure hunters, pulling out volumes with exclamations of recognition and delight. "I remember this one." Clara held up a battered copy of Fairy Tales. "This was my favorite," Ben said, clutching a picture book about trains. That night, after supper, Eliza sat in Sarah's rocking chair. It felt strange, inhabiting the space of a dead woman, but the twins had insisted, and read to them. Not doing character voices like their mother had because she'd never be Sarah and didn't want to try, but reading in her own voice, steady and clear, while Clara and Ben curled up on either side of her like puppies seeking warmth. Wade watched from his doorway, his expression unreadable. But he didn't leave, didn't hide in the barn or disappear into work. He just stood there, witnessing his children remember how to be children again. When Eliza finished the story and sent the twins to bed, Wade finally spoke. "Thank you." 2 words, but they carried weight. "They're easy to care about," Eliza said. "Still, thank you." He disappeared upstairs before she could respond, leaving Eliza alone in the main room with the scattered books and the lingering warmth of something that felt dangerously close to family. She should have been more careful, should have protected her heart better, because in 3 years her contract would end and she'd be free to leave, free to build her own life somewhere else. But sitting in that rocking chair, in that clean kitchen, in the house that was slowly becoming home, Eliza realized the terrible truth. She didn't want to leave, and that was going to make everything so much harder. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. The first snow came in October, earlier than Wade expected and harder than anyone wanted. Eliza woke to a world transformed, white and silent, and cold enough to make her bones ache. She'd grown up with winters, but farm winters were different from mountain winters. This was the kind of cold that killed things. Wade was already up, standing at the kitchen window with his coffee, staring at the white landscape like it had personally betrayed him. "How bad?" Eliza asked, joining him. "Bad enough. We need to move the cattle to lower pasture before it gets worse. Check the feed stores. Make sure the barn's secure." He drained his cup, set it down harder than necessary. "Winter came early. That's never good." The twins appeared on the stairs, faces pressed against the window, excited about the snow in the way only children could be. "Can we go out?" Ben asked. "After chores," Wade said. "And not for long. This ain't plain weather." Clara's face fell, but she didn't argue. Even at 8, she understood that frontier life didn't pause for fun. The next week was brutal. Wade worked from dawn until long after dark, reinforcing structures, moving livestock, preparing for the hard months ahead. Eliza kept the house running, the food coming, the children occupied. She learned to bank the fire so it would last through the night without burning through their wood supply. Learned which parts of the house lost heat fastest and needed extra attention. Learned that frontier winter was less a season and more a war of attrition. The twins helped where they could, but mostly they grew restless. Cabin fever set in fast when you couldn't go outside without risking frostbite. "I'm bored," Clara announced one afternoon, sprawled dramatically across the floor. "Read a book," Eliza suggested, kneading bread dough. "I've read all the books." "No, you haven't." "I've read all the good ones." Ben sat at the table, carving a piece of wood with more enthusiasm than skill. "When's the snow going to stop?" "When it's ready," Eliza said. "Nature doesn't care about your schedule." "Mama used to tell us stories when we were stuck inside," Clara said, not looking at Eliza. "Made up ones." It was a test. Eliza knew that. Everything with the twins was still partly a test, even after months of relative peace. "I'm not much for making up stories," she admitted. "Why not?" "Because I'm not your mother." The words came out sharper than intended. Eliza softened her tone. "I can tell you true things, though. About growing up on a farm. About my parents. Would that work?" The twins exchanged one of their silent conversations. "Okay," Clara said finally. "Tell us about your father." So Eliza did. She told them about a man who'd loved his land more than was probably healthy, who taught her to read weather patterns and soil quality, who'd carried her on his shoulders through wheat fields that stretched to the horizon, who'd played fiddle badly, but with enthusiasm, making her mother laugh. She didn't tell them about the end, about debt and drought and the rope in the barn. They didn't need that weight. When she finished, Ben was watching her with those sharp, assessing eyes he'd inherited from his father. "You miss him," he said. Not a question. Every day. "Does it get better?" Clara asked quietly. "The missing?" And Eliza understood they weren't really asking about her father anymore. "It gets different," she said honestly. "You learn to carry it. Some days it's heavier than others, but you keep going because that's what they'd want. Your mama would want you to keep going." Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't remember her smell anymore. I used to remember it, but now I can't, and it makes me so angry." "I'm forgetting her voice," Ben added, his own voice breaking slightly. "Sometimes I try real hard to hear it in my head, but it's all fuzzy now." Eliza set down her dough, washed her hands, and sat at the table with them. "That's not forgetting. That's just how memory works. The details fade, but the important things stay. How she made you feel, how she loved you, that doesn't disappear." "How do you know?" Clara demanded, angry now. "Your parents are dead too. How do you know it doesn't all just go away?" "Because I still feel my mother's hands braiding my hair, even though I can't remember the last time she did it. I still hear my father's laugh, even if I can't hear his exact voice anymore. The love doesn't fade, Clara, just the edges around it." It wasn't much comfort, but it was honest, and these children had been lied to enough by well-meaning adults who promised time would heal everything. Time didn't heal. Time just taught you how to function around the wound. The moment was broken by Wade stomping in from outside, bringing cold air and snow with him. "Storm's getting worse," he announced, shaking ice from his coat. "We're going to be snowed in for a few days at least." "Do we have enough supplies?" Eliza asked. "For us, yeah. For the cattle." He trailed off, his expression grim. "We'll see. Might lose some of the herd if this keeps up." That night, the wind howled like something alive and angry. Eliza lay in her narrow bed, listening to the house creak under the assault, and thought about how quickly things could fall apart. One early storm, one bad season. That's all it took to destroy everything a person built. She must have finally slept because she woke to Ben shaking her shoulder. "Eliza, Eliza, wake up!" She sat up, groggy and disoriented. "What's wrong?" "Claire's sick, real sick." Fear shot through her, sharp and immediate. She grabbed her shawl and followed Ben across the hall to the twins' room. Clara lay in her bed, her face flushed and her breathing labored. Even from the doorway, Eliza could see the sheen of sweat on her skin. Wade was already there, one large hand pressed to his daughter's forehead. When he pulled it back, his face was tight with barely controlled panic. "She's burning up," he said. Eliza moved to the bed, pressing her own hand to Clara's forehead. The heat radiating from the child's skin was terrifying. "When did this start?" she asked Ben. "I don't know. She was fine when we went to bed. I woke up because she was making weird noises." Clara's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Mama?" Wade flinched like he'd been struck. "No, sweetie," Eliza said gently. "It's Eliza. You're sick, but we're going to take care of you." "I'm cold," Clara whispered, even as sweat rolled down her temples. "She needs a doctor," Wade said, his voice rough. "The nearest doctor is in Millerton. 4 hours in good weather." Eliza looked at the window, where snow was still falling in thick curtains. "We'd never make it there and back." "Then what do we do?" Wade demanded, and for the first time since Eliza had known him, he sounded truly helpless. She forced herself to think past the fear. Her mother had nursed her through fevers, had taught her basic remedies. It wasn't much, but it was something. "We break the fever, cool cloths, willow bark tea if we have any, keep her hydrated. And we watch her, every minute, Wade nodded, latching onto the plan like a drowning man grabbing a rope. I'll get the willow bark from the pantry. Ben, you pump water, cold as you can get it. They moved into action, each taking a task. Eliza stayed with Clara, stripping away the heavy quilts that were trapping heat, leaving just a thin sheet. The girl whimpered at the cold air but didn't wake fully. The night stretched into the longest of Eliza's life. They took turns sitting with Clara, applying cool cloths to her burning skin, coaxing sips of willow bark tea past her cracked lips. Wade barely left the room, his large frame hunched in the chair beside the bed, watching his daughter with an intensity that was almost frightening. "This is how it started with Sarah," he said at one point, his voice hollow. "A fever, just a fever at first. Then it got worse so fast we couldn't keep up." "Clara's not Sarah," Eliza said firmly. "She's young, she's strong. She's going to fight this. You don't know that." "No." "But I believe it, and right now that's what matters." Dawn came gray and cold. The fever hadn't broken. If anything, Clara seemed worse, her breathing more shallow, her skin somehow both burning and clammy. Ben had fallen asleep on the floor, exhausted from worry. Wade looked like a ghost of himself, and then Ben woke up coughing. "No," Wade breathed. "No, not him too." But it was clear within an hour that Ben had whatever Clara had. The same burning forehead, the same labored breathing. 2 children sick with a storm still raging outside and no help coming. Eliza had never felt more inadequate in her life. She was 18 years old with a dead mother's half-remembered remedies and 2 critically ill children depending on her. This wasn't something you could solve with hard work or stubbornness. This required knowledge she didn't have. "There's got to be something," Wade said, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Someone. Anyone." Eliza racked her brain, trying to remember conversations, gossip, anything useful, and then it hit her. "Old Mary," she said. Wade stopped pacing. "What?" "Old Mary. The trapper woman who lives up near Copper Creek. Tom Crawford mentioned her once, said she knew frontier medicine, herbs and remedies the doctors don't use. That's 10 miles from here, in this storm, on that terrain." "I know." Eliza stood, her decision made. "But it's something. It's better than watching them burn up while we stand here helpless." "You've never ridden that route. You'll get lost in the snow. You'll freeze to death before you make it halfway." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll make it, and she'll have something that can help." Eliza grabbed her coat from the peg. "You need to stay with them. I'm the only one who can go." Wade stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "I can't let you do this. You can't stop me. I'm contracted to you for labor, not obedience." "Eliza, your children are dying." The blunt words stopped him cold. "I can see it in your face. You've seen this before. You know how fast it can go. So either we try something desperate, or we wait here and hope the fever breaks on its own. Which do you want to bet their lives on?" Wade's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Tom's place is 2 miles south. Follow the creek. It'll lead you there even in the snow. Tom knows the route to Copper Creek. He can guide you." "All right. Take the sorrel mare. She's sure-footed. Don't push her too hard or she'll give out." Wade moved to a cabinet, pulled out a heavy wool coat. "This was Sarah's. It's warmer than yours." Eliza took it, trying not to think about wearing a dead woman's coat on what might be a suicide mission. Wade grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight. "You come back. Hear me? You get Mary. You come back. Both of you." "I'll try." "Don't try. Do it." His eyes were fierce, desperate. "I can't lose you too." The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither of them had time to unpack. Eliza just nodded and headed for the door. The cold hit her like a physical blow. Snow whipped sideways, driven by wind that seemed determined to strip the skin from her bones. The sorrel mare stood in the barn, looking about as enthusiastic about this journey as Eliza felt. "Just you and me," Eliza told the horse, saddling her with numb fingers. "Let's try not to die." The ride to Tom's place should have taken 30 minutes. It took over an hour, Eliza clinging to the horse while snow blinded her and cold seeped through even Sarah's heavy coat. She followed the creek like Wade had instructed, trusting the horse's instincts when her own sense of direction failed completely. Tom's ranch appeared through the white like a mirage. Eliza half fell from the saddle, stumbled to the door, and pounded on it with fists she could barely feel. Tom opened the door, took one look at her, and pulled her inside. "What in the hell are you doing out in this?" "The twins," Eliza gasped, her lungs burning from the cold air. "Fever. Both of them. I need to get to Old Mary." Tom's expression shifted from shock to grim understanding. "That's a hard ride in good weather." "I know. Will you take me?" He didn't hesitate. "Let me get my gear. You warm up while I saddle my horse." 10 minutes later, they were back in the storm. Tom rode ahead, his horse breaking trail through snow that was already knee-deep in places. Eliza followed, hunched against the wind, her face so cold she couldn't feel it anymore. The trail to Copper Creek climbed into the hills, following a route that was more suggestion than actual path. Twice, Eliza was certain they were lost. Twice, Tom found the way forward through landmarks only he could recognize under all that white. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time became meaningless in the cold and the endless monotony of snow. Eliza's thoughts narrowed to simple things. Stay on the horse. Keep moving. Don't think about how numb your hands are. She almost missed it when Tom stopped. "There!" he shouted over the wind, pointing. A cabin materialized from the storm. Small, rough, more den than dwelling. Smoke rose from a chimney pipe, the only sign of life. They dismounted, tied the horses to a post, and approached. Tom knocked. 3 sharp raps. "Mary, it's Tom Crawford. Got an emergency." The door opened a crack, revealing a slice of weathered face and one suspicious eye. "Emergency, huh?" "Everyone's got an emergency." The voice was rough, gravelly, decades past caring about courtesy. "Wade Mercer's kids are sick, bad fever. The girl who's helping them rode through a storm to get here. That ain't an emergency. I don't know what is." The eye fixed on Eliza, assessing. Then the door opened wider. "Get in here before you freeze to death on my doorstep. Bad for business." The cabin's interior was dim, cramped, and smelled of dried herbs and wood smoke. Mary herself was a woman of indeterminate age. Could have been 60, could have been 80. Small, wiry, with hands that moved with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime working with plants and medicines. "Tell me about the symptoms," she commanded, already moving toward shelves lined with jars and bundles. Eliza described everything: the fever, the sweating, the labored breathing, how fast it had come on. Mary listened, nodding occasionally, pulling down various containers. "Sounds like mountain fever. Comes fast, burns hot. Can kill children in 3 days if it gets into the lungs." Eliza's stomach dropped. "Can you help them?" "Maybe. Got a tincture that might work. Angelica root, yarrow, some other things. Break the fever if it's not too far gone." Mary packed items into a leather bag with quick efficiency. "You came all this way for children that ain't even yours." "They need help. That's enough." Mary grunted, something that might have been approval. "Most folks wouldn't risk their own skin for someone else's kids. You're either brave or stupid." "Probably stupid," Eliza admitted. "Well, stupid or not, we better get back before those children die." Mary pulled on a massive fur coat that made her look like a small bear. "Tom, you lead. I'll ride with the girl in case she falls off from exhaustion." The ride back was somehow worse than the ride out. Eliza's adrenaline was fading, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and cold that had seeped into her core. Mary rode behind her, occasionally barking orders to keep her awake. "Don't you dare fall asleep on this horse. You fall, you die. That's simple." "Not planning to die," Eliza mumbled. "Plans don't mean much in a storm. Stay awake. Think about something. Tell me about yourself." So Eliza talked, her words slurring together from cold and fatigue, told Mary about her parents, the farm, the auction, Wade and the twins. Anything to keep her mind working. By the time they reached Blackstone Ridge, the sun was setting, or what passed for sunset through the storm, a slight dimming of the gray. The ranch appeared like salvation, and Eliza nearly wept with relief. Wade met them at the door, his face gaunt with exhaustion and fear. "You made it," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "We made it," Eliza confirmed, sliding off the horse with legs that barely worked. "This is Mary. She brought medicine." Mary pushed past them both, all business. "Show me the children, now." Wade led her upstairs while Eliza stood in the entryway, dripping snow and shaking with exhaustion. Tom appeared at her elbow. "You should sit down before you fall down." I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Sit. He guided her to a chair by the fire. Feeling slowly returned to her extremities, and with it, pain. Her fingers burned. Her toes felt like they'd been crushed. Her face was raw from windburn. Worth it, though. If Mary could save the twins, every second of suffering was worth it. Mary came back downstairs an hour later, her expression unreadable. I've given them the tincture, bathed them in cool water. Now we wait. How long? Wade asked. If the fever's going to break, it'll happen in the next 6 hours. If it doesn't... She left the sentence unfinished. Wade sagged against the wall, looking 10 years older than he had that morning. Thank you, he said. Both of you. I don't have words for what you did. Save your thanks till we know if it worked, Mary said gruffly. I'm going to stay the night, watch them, make sure they take the tincture on schedule. Tom departed, promising to check on his own ranch and return if the storm broke. Mary commandeered the spare room, setting up a rotation of care. Wade sat with his children, refusing to leave them. Eliza collapsed in her own room, fully clothed, and fell immediately into a sleep so deep it felt like death. She woke to someone shaking her shoulder, jerked upright, heart pounding, mind immediately jumping to the worst. But Wade was smiling, actually smiling. The fever broke, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Both of them. About an hour ago. They're weak, but they're going to be okay. Relief hit Eliza so hard she started crying, just sat there on the bed, tears streaming down her face, unable to stop. Wade sat beside her, not touching, but present. You saved them. You rode into a storm and brought back the one person who could help. You saved my children. I just went for a ride, Eliza said, trying to downplay it. Don't! Wade's voice was firm. Don't make it smaller than it was. You risked your life for my family. That means something. She looked at him then, really looked at him. His eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion and crying, his face haggard, his hair sticking up in all directions. He looked wrecked. He looked human. They're good kids, she said. Worth saving. So are you, Wade replied quietly. In case nobody's told you that lately. The words settled between them, heavy with unspoken things. Eliza didn't know what to do with them, so she just nodded and wiped her face. I should check on them, she said. Yeah, okay. They went upstairs together. The twins were sleeping peacefully now, their breathing even, color returning to their faces. Mary sat in the corner, her sharp eyes missing nothing. They'll need rest and feeding up, she announced. Keep them warm, but not too warm. Light foods for a few days. No excitement. We can do that, Eliza said. Mary stood, gathering her things. I'll be going then. Storm's breaking. Should be able to make it home before dark. Wade paid her, more than she asked for, Eliza suspected. Mary accepted with a grunt and a nod, then fixed Eliza with a pointed stare. You did good, girl. Most people talk about helping. You actually did it. Coming from Mary, it was high praise. After she left, Wade and Eliza settled into a pattern of care. One of them always with the twins, coaxing them to drink water, eat weak broth, stay still even as they started feeling better. Clara woke fully that evening, her eyes clearer. Eliza, she said, her voice hoarse. I'm here. Ben said you rode through the storm, said you saved us. Ben's exaggerating. I just went for help. Claire's hand found hers, small and weak but insistent. Thank you. You're welcome. I'm sorry we were mean to you at the beginning. Eliza smiled. You were just protecting yourselves. I understand. We don't want you to leave, Clara said, her eyes filling with tears. Ever. You're not Mama, but you're ours. And we want you to stay. The words cracked something open in Eliza's chest. She squeezed Clara's hand gently. I'm not going anywhere, she promised. It was only later, lying in bed that night, that she realized what she'd said. Not, I'll stay for the contract. Just, I'm not going anywhere. Like she'd already made the choice without realizing it. Like Blackstone Ridge had stopped being a job and started being home. Winter deepened after the fever broke, settling over Blackstone Ridge like a heavy blanket that refused to lift. The twins recovered slowly, their energy returning in fits and starts. Clara grew restless first, prowling the house like a caged animal, demanding to go outside even when the temperature was cold enough to crack wood. Ben was more patient, content to sit by the fire and work on his reading, though Eliza caught him staring longingly out the window more than once. The dynamic in the house had shifted in ways nobody acknowledged but everyone felt. The twins no longer tested Eliza at every turn. Instead, they sought her out, Clara asking her opinion on things that didn't matter, Ben showing her his carved figures and waiting for her praise. Small gestures that added up to acceptance. To something more than acceptance. Wade was different too. He still didn't talk much. That would probably never change. But the silence between them felt comfortable now. Companionable. He'd started lingering in the kitchen after meals, nursing coffee while Eliza cleaned up, not saying anything but not leaving either. Sometimes their hands would brush, reaching for the same dish, and neither of them would pull away as quickly as they should have. Eliza tried not to think about what any of it meant. Tried to focus on the work, the daily rhythm of survival, the contract that still had 2.5 years left on it. But late at night, alone in her room, she'd catch herself imagining a future that extended beyond those contractual obligations. A future where she stayed not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It was dangerous thinking, the kind that could break a person. The weather finally broke in late November, giving them a week of clear, cold days. Wade used the opportunity to make the trip to Millerton for supplies, and this time he insisted Eliza come with him. "You haven't been off the ranch since the fever," he said. "You're starting to look pale." "I'm always pale. It's winter." "Paler than usual then. Come on. Fresh air will do you good." So Eliza found herself back on the wagon seat beside Wade, watching the landscape roll past. The world looked different, covered in snow, cleaner somehow, like the white had wiped away all the rough edges. "You did good," Wade said abruptly, breaking the comfortable silence. "With the kids, during the sickness, after, all of it. You already thanked me. I'm thanking you again." He paused, clearly wrestling with words that didn't come naturally. "Sarah would have liked you. That's the first time I've been able to think that about anyone since she died." Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Just let the words settle and tried not to read too much into them. Millerton looked half dead in the winter light. The streets were empty except for a few hardy souls braving the cold for necessary errands. Wade pulled up in front of the general store, and they went inside to find Mrs. Garrett behind the counter as always, her expression souring the moment she saw Eliza. "Wade," she said curtly, "didn't expect to see you till spring. Needed a few things, couldn't wait." Wade pulled out his list, setting it on the counter. "Also wanted to settle my account. Been meaning to do it for a while." Mrs. Garrett's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's so? Must be doing well then." "Well enough." While Wade discussed orders and prices, Eliza wandered the store looking at bolts of fabric she couldn't afford and household goods she didn't need. She was examining a set of tin measuring cups when she felt someone watching her. Dutch Kellerman stood in the doorway, blocking most of the light. He'd somehow gotten bigger over the winter, or maybe it was just the way he filled space with menace. "Well, well," he said, grinning that yellow-toothed grin. "The auction girl. Still at Wade's place, I see." Eliza's stomach tightened, but she kept her voice level. "I'm contracted there for 3 years." "Right, contracted." He moved closer, and Eliza fought the urge to step back. "Heard an interesting story recently. Heard you rode through a blizzard to save Wade's kids. That true?" "I went for help, yes." "Mighty dedicated for hired help. Makes a man wonder what you're getting out of the arrangement." The implication was clear and disgusting. Before Eliza could respond, Wade was there, putting himself between her and Dutch with the easy authority of a man who'd done this before. "Dutch," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "We talked about this." "Did we? I don't recall." Dutch's grin widened. "I was just making conversation, being neighborly." "Being neighborly would be minding your own business and keeping your mouth shut." "That a threat, Wade?" "It's a fact. You got a problem with how I run my ranch or who works there, you can take it up with me directly. But you leave Eliza out of it." Something flickered in Dutch's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Awful protective of the help. "She saved my children's lives. That buys her a lot of protection." Wade's stance shifted slightly, and Eliza recognized the tension in his shoulders. He was ready for this to get physical. "Now step aside. We got business to finish." For a moment, the two men faced each other, and Eliza was certain someone was about to throw a punch. Then Dutch laughed, a harsh, barking sound, and moved aside. "Sure, Wade, whatever you say."
He tipped his hat mockingly at Eliza.
Ma'am.
After he left, Mrs. Garrett finished Wade's order in tight-lipped silence. The tension in the store was thick enough to choke on. Back in the wagon, Wade was silent for the first mile, his jaw working like he was chewing rocks. "I'm sorry," Eliza said finally. "What for?" "For causing problems, for making people talk." Wade looked at her sharply. "You didn't cause anything. Dutch is a miserable bastard who can't stand seeing other people happy, or even just functional. He's been needling me since Sarah died, waiting for me to fall apart so he could sweep in and buy my land cheap." "Why does he hate you so much?"
Because I got something he wants and can't have. Land, water rights, prime grazing territory. Sarah turned down his marriage proposal before she met me, and he never forgave either of us for that. Wade's hands tightened on the reins. He's the kind of man who sees everything as a competition he has to win. And right now, you're part of that competition whether you want to be or not. Eliza felt cold that had nothing to do with the weather. What's he going to do?
"I don't know.
But whatever it is, we'll handle it. Wade glanced at her. You ain't alone in this. Understand? She nodded, trying to believe it. They made one more stop before heading home, Tom Crawford's place. Wade wanted to repay him for helping during the storm, and Tom had been asking about the twins' recovery. Tom greeted them warmly, insisting they come in for coffee despite Wade's protests that they needed to get back before dark. His wife, Martha, was a round, cheerful woman who immediately pulled Eliza into the kitchen for woman talk, while the men discussed ranch business. "I heard what you did," Martha said, pouring coffee into chipped mugs. "Riding through that storm. Tom said you barely knew which way was up, but you kept going anyway. The children needed help. There wasn't a choice." "There's always a choice, honey. Most people choose safe. You chose brave." Martha settled into a chair, studying Eliza with shrewd eyes. "How are things at the Mercer place?" "Really? Fine. Good, actually. And Wade? He treating you right?" Eliza felt her face heat. "He's been nothing but respectful." "That's not what I asked." Martha smiled knowingly. "But all right, keep your secrets. I will say this, though. Wade Mercer's been dead inside since Sarah passed. First time I've seen him look alive again was when you two walked through my door just now. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I'm just keeping house and watching the children." "Sure you are." Martha's smile widened. "And I'm the Queen of England." Before Eliza could protest further, the men rejoined them, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Weather predictions, crop plans, local gossip. But Martha's words stayed with Eliza, nagging at her like a splinter she couldn't quite reach. The ride back to Blackstone Ridge was quiet, the sun setting in shades of orange and purple over the snow-covered hills, beautiful in the harsh way frontier sunsets always were. "Martha likes you," Wade said as they pulled up to the house. "She was very kind. She's also nosy as hell, and has been trying to marry me off to every eligible woman in 3 counties for the past 2 years. Wade climbed down from the wagon, then offered Eliza his hand to help her down. "Don't let her put ideas in your head." "What kind of ideas?" Eliza asked, even though she knew perfectly well. Wade looked at her for a long moment, his hand still holding hers even though she was already on the ground. "The kind that make things complicated." "Things are already complicated." "Yeah." He released her hand, stepping back. "They are." The twins burst out of the house before either of them could say more, full of questions about town and demands for any treats Wade might have brought back. The moment passed, sliding away into the chaos of children and unloading supplies and the practical demands of evening chores. But it lingered in the air between them, unspoken and growing. December brought a string of visitors, neighbors checking in, Tom delivering a butchered pig as thanks for Martha's Christmas cake recipe, even Mary stopping by to inspect the twins and grunt approval at their recovery. Each visit felt like a test Eliza hadn't studied for, everyone watching to see how she fit into the Mercer household, weighing her presence against the ghost of Sarah. The twins handled it better than Eliza expected. When Mrs. Garrett's daughter made a snide comment about the help-playing mother, Clara had kicked her shin hard enough to leave a bruise. Ben, usually the quieter twin, had loudly announced that Eliza was the best cook in the territory, and anyone who said otherwise was lying. Wade had to apologize to Mrs. Garrett, while simultaneously trying not to smile. After the woman left in a huff, he'd looked at his children seriously. "We don't kick people," he said.
Even when they're mean to Eliza? Clara demanded. Especially then. Eliza can defend herself without you two starting fights. But we're a family, Ben said, confused. That's what families do. They protect each other. Wade had gone very still at that. So had Eliza. The word hung there. Family, casual, and devastating. Yes, Wade said finally, his voice rough. That's what families do. Christmas came quietly. They didn't have much, but Eliza made it special anyway. Pine branches cut from the forest and arranged around the house, cookies shaped like stars and trees, a simple gift for each twin that she'd been working on in secret for weeks. A carved wooden horse for Ben, a cloth doll with yarn hair for Clara. The twins had made gifts, too, a drawing of the ranch for Wade, surprisingly detailed for 8-year-olds, and for Eliza, a flower pressed between two pieces of glass, carefully wrapped in cloth. We picked it last summer, Claire explained, before we knew you. Ben wanted to save it for Mama's grave, but I said she wouldn't mind if we gave it to you instead. Eliza's throat closed up. She hugged both children, unable to speak. Wade's gift was more practical, a new coat, properly fitted, warmer than Sarah's hand-me-down. Can't have you freezing to death, he said gruffly. Bad for morale. She wanted to give him something in return, but didn't know what. What did you give a man who needed everything but wanted nothing? In the end, she baked his favorite pie, apple, with cinnamon, and told herself that was enough. That night, after the twins were asleep, she and Wade sat by the fire, the house peaceful around them. This was a good Christmas, Wade said quietly. First one that didn't hurt since Sarah died. The twins seem happy. They are. Because of you. He looked at her then, the firelight casting shadows across his face. I need to say something, and I need you to let me get through it without interrupting. Eliza's heart started pounding. All right. When I bought your contract, I told myself it was just practical. I needed help. You needed work. End of story. But that's not true anymore. Hasn't been true for a while. He paused, searching for words. You're not just help. You're not just the woman who works here. You're... A loud crash from upstairs cut him off. They both jumped up, rushing to the stairs. Ben stood in the hallway, looking sheepish beside a broken chamber pot. I tripped, he said. Sorry. Crisis averted, mess cleaned up, child tucked back into bed. By the time they made it back downstairs, the moment was gone. Wade had retreated behind his usual reserve, and Eliza didn't know how to get back to whatever he'd been about to say. I should get to bed, she said. Yeah, me too. Wade stood awkwardly by the fire. What I was saying before, you don't have to explain. I want to. Then say it tomorrow, when we're not exhausted and everything isn't so... She gestured helplessly at the space between them. Wade nodded slowly. Tomorrow, then. But tomorrow brought a visitor neither of them expected. A man rode up to the ranch just after breakfast, official-looking in a dark suit despite the cold. He dismounted, tied his horse, and knocked on the door with the kind of authority that suggested he was used to being obeyed. Wade answered, his expression going carefully neutral. Can I help you? Wade Mercer? I'm looking for Miss Eliza Hartwell. I'm told she's contracted to work here. Eliza appeared behind Wade, her stomach dropping. I'm Eliza Hartwell. The man pulled out papers from his saddlebag. My name is James Sterling. I'm an attorney from Denver. I've been looking for you for some time, Miss Hartwell. Why? Because you're an heiress. Your father's sister, your Aunt Margaret, passed away 3 months ago. She left you her entire estate, a house in Denver, considerable savings, and property worth approximately $15,000. The words didn't make sense. Eliza stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. I don't have an aunt, she said. You did. Margaret Hartwell. She left your father's family years ago after a falling out, moved to Denver, never married. But she never forgot about you. When she learned about your parents' deaths and your situation, she immediately changed her will. Unfortunately, she died before she could contact you directly. Wade had gone very still beside her. $15,000? Plus the house and property. Miss Hartwell is quite well off. Sterling smiled, clearly expecting gratitude. You're free, Miss Hartwell. Free and wealthy. You can leave this place whenever you'd like. The words should have been wonderful, should have been everything she'd dreamed about during those first desperate weeks at Blackstone Ridge. Freedom, security, the ability to build whatever life she wanted without answering to anyone.
Instead, they felt like a death sentence.
I have a contract, Eliza said slowly, which can be dissolved. Mr. Mercer paid $60 for 3 years of labor. I'm authorized to offer him $500 to terminate the agreement immediately. That's more than fair compensation. Sterling pulled out more papers, setting them on the table. All you need to do is sign here, and you're free to go. There's a stage leaving Millerton in 3 days. I can escort you to Denver personally. Eliza looked at the papers, then at Wade. His face was unreadable, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. Can we have a moment? She asked Sterling. Of course. I'll wait outside. He stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. $15,000, Wade said finally. That's more money than most people see in a lifetime. I know. You'd be set. Could do anything you wanted. Go anywhere. I know. You should take it. The words came out flat, emotionless. You'd be a fool not to. Eliza felt something crack in her chest. Is that what you want? For me to leave? Wade's jaw worked. Doesn't matter what I want. This is your chance to get out, to stop being someone's contracted labor and start being your own person again. I am my own person. Here. You're my employee. There's a difference. Is there? Eliza's voice rose, frustration breaking through. Because lately it's felt like more than that. Or am I imagining things? Wade flinched. You're not imagining things. Then tell me. Tell me what last night was about. What all of this has been about. Because I can't make this decision without knowing. Knowing what? If there's a reason to stay beyond the contract, the words burst out of her desperate and raw. Because I have money now. I have choices. And I need to know if staying here is just me being too scared to leave, or if there's actually something worth staying for. Wade stared at her, his expression tortured. You want me to say it? Yes. Fine. I love you. The words came out harsh, almost angry. I love you, and I have for months, and I've been terrified to say anything because I knew this day would come. Knew eventually you'd have a way out, and I'd have to watch you leave, and it would destroy me all over again. There. That what you needed to hear? Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You love me. Of course I love you. How could I not? You saved my children. You brought my house back to life. You made me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just surviving. Wade ran a hand through his hair, looking wrecked. But I'm not going to trap you here with that. You deserve better than a broken widower on a failing ranch. You deserve that house in Denver and the chance to be something more than the auction girl. I don't want to be something more, Eliza said, her voice shaking. I want to be here, with you, with the twins. This is home. It's been home for 8 months. You've got your whole life ahead of you. And I want to spend it here. She moved closer, forcing him to look at her. Do you think I stayed just because of a contract? Do you think I rode through that storm because I'm a good employee? I stayed because I love you too, you stubborn, impossible man. I love you and Clara and Ben, and I don't want to leave. Wade looked stunned, like he'd been hit in the head with a rock. You love me? Yes. Even though I'm moody and terrible at talking and still half in love with my dead wife? Yes. Eliza took his hands, holding them tight. Even though all of that. You're really going to turn down $15,000 to stay on a ranch with a man who can barely string 5 words together? Apparently so. Wade pulled her close then, kissing her with a desperation that spoke to every fear and hope neither of them had been able to voice. Eliza melted into it, into him, finally allowing herself to feel everything she'd been pushing down for months. When they finally broke apart, Wade rested his forehead against hers. You're completely insane, he said. Probably. The twins are going to lose their minds. Probably that too. We'll have to get married. Can't have you living here otherwise. People already talk enough. Eliza pulled back to look at him. Is that a proposal? Wade had the grace to look sheepish. Not my smoothest moment. Try again. He dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen, still holding her hands, looking up at her with those pale gray eyes that had slowly become everything. Eliza Hartwell, you're the bravest, stubbornest, most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and the twins' mother and put up with my silence and my grief and whatever else the frontier throws at us? Tears streamed down Eliza's face. Yes. Yes to all of it.
Wade stood, pulled her close again, and for the first time since she'd known him, he laughed. Actually laughed, deep and genuine and full of relief. The door burst open and the twins tumbled in, clearly having been listening the entire time. "You're staying?" Clara demanded. "I'm staying." "And marrying Pa?" Ben added. "That too." Both children screamed and launched themselves at Eliza, nearly knocking her over. Wade caught them all, his arms around his entire family, and something in his face finally settled. The grief was still there, would probably always be there, but it had company now. Hope. Joy. A future that extended beyond just survival. Sterling was considerably less thrilled when they told him the news. "You're turning down $15,000 for this?" He looked around the modest ranch house like it personally offended him. "I am," Eliza said firmly. "The money is yours regardless. The house, the property, your aunt left it to you. I can't stop you from making a foolish decision, but I can ensure you get what's rightfully yours." "Then I'll use it to improve the ranch," Eliza decided. "New equipment, repairs, maybe hire some help come spring, but I'm staying here." Sterling shook his head, clearly thinking she'd lost her mind. But he left the papers, made her sign the necessary documents, and departed with dire predictions about her future regrets. After he left, Eliza looked at Wade. "I just turned down a fortune to live on a struggling ranch in the middle of nowhere. Tell me I'm not crazy." Wade kissed her forehead. "You're definitely crazy, but so am I. So I guess we're perfect for each other." From upstairs came the sound of the twins arguing about wedding plans, their voices excited and loud. "They're already planning the whole thing," Wade said, smiling. "Should we stop them?" "Probably won't work anyway." He pulled her close again. "Besides, let them be happy. We all deserve that." And standing there in the kitchen of Blackstone Ridge, with the twins' voices carrying down the stairs and Wade's arms around her, and a future spreading out before them that actually felt possible, Eliza thought he might be right. They all deserved happiness. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finally found it. Planning a frontier wedding turned out to be significantly more complicated than Eliza had anticipated, mostly because every woman within 20 miles suddenly had opinions about how it should be done. Martha Crawford insisted it had to be in the spring, with wildflowers and proper weather. Mrs. Garrett, who'd somehow learned about the engagement despite not being told, announced that a rushed wedding would only fuel gossip, and they should wait at least 6 months for propriety's sake. Even old Mary showed up one afternoon with unsolicited advice about fertility herbs and warnings about men who snored. Wade bore it all with remarkable patience, mostly by disappearing to work on the fence line whenever visitors arrived. "Coward," Eliza accused him one evening after Martha had spent 3 hours discussing table linens. "Smart," Wade corrected. "They ain't interested in my opinions anyway." "They're not interested in mine either. They just want to plan the wedding they think I should want." Wade pulled her close, tucking her against his chest. They'd gotten more comfortable with casual touches since the proposal. Nothing improper, but enough to make the twins giggle and roll their eyes. "What do you want?" he asked. "Something small, simple, just us and the people who actually matter." "That works for me." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Though the twins might riot if they don't get to be involved somehow." As if summoned, Clara appeared in the doorway. "Ben and I should be in the wedding. We're part of the family." "Were you listening?" Eliza asked. "Obviously. Ben's listening too. He's just better at hiding." Clara crossed her arms. "We want to help. This is important." Wade sighed. "Clara." "No, she's right," Eliza interrupted. "You two should be part of it. What did you have in mind?" Clara's face lit up. "Ben could hold the rings. I could carry flowers or something. And we should both get new clothes." "Mine don't fit right anymore." "None of your clothes fit right," Wade muttered. "You grow like a weed." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. We'll go to Millerton next week. Get you both something nice." Claire squealed and ran off to tell her brother, leaving Wade and Eliza alone again. "You're good with them," Wade said quietly. "Better than I ever managed. You're their father. You kept them alive through the worst time of their lives. That's not nothing. I kept them fed and housed. You made them happy again. There's a difference." Eliza turned in his arms to face him. They were always going to be happy again. They just needed time, and someone who didn't try to replace what they lost. Is that what the others did wrong? That's what scared them, I think. All those housekeepers trying to be their mother instead of just being present. She paused. "I know I'll never be Sarah. Don't want to be, but
I can be something else, something new. That's enough. Wade's expression went soft in a way it rarely did. How'd you get so wise? I'm not wise. I just know what it's like to lose everything and have people expect you to be grateful for whatever scraps they offer. She smiled slightly. I never wanted to be that person, the one who shows up after tragedy and acts like they're doing everyone a favor. You're not. You saved us, all of us. We saved each other, Eliza corrected. That's how this works. They decided on a March wedding, early enough to avoid spring mud, but late enough that the worst of winter would be past. Eliza used some of her inheritance money to order fabric from Denver. Nothing extravagant, but good quality wool for Wade and the twins, and a simple blue dress for herself. Not white. White felt presumptuous for a girl who'd been sold at auction. Blue felt honest. The news spread through the territory faster than Eliza expected. Most people seemed genuinely happy for them. Tom and Martha were thrilled. Even some of the townspeople who'd looked down on Eliza before softened their attitudes when they learned she was marrying Wade properly, not just living in sin. But Dutch Kellerman took it differently. He showed up at the ranch 2 weeks before the wedding, riding up bold as brass like he had every right to be there. Wade was out checking the herd, so Eliza answered the door with the twins hovering protectively behind her. Miss Hartwell, Dutch said, not bothering to dismount. Or should I say, future Mrs. Mercer. What do you want, Dutch? Just paying my respects, congratulating you on your good fortune. His smile was ugly. Must be nice, going from auction block to lady of the manor in less than a year. If you've got something to say it and leave. Dutch's smile widened. I'm just wondering if Wade knows what he's really getting. See, I've been hearing interesting things about your inheritance. $15,000 from an aunt you never mentioned. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Eliza's blood ran cold. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. A desperate girl gets sold at auction, lands at Wade's ranch, and suddenly an aunt nobody knew existed dies and leaves her a fortune. Right when Wade's starting to care about her. Some might call that suspicious. Get off our property, Eliza said, her voice shaking with anger. I'm just saying, a man should know who he's marrying, especially a man with children to protect. Dutch tipped his hat mockingly. Congratulations on the wedding, Miss Hartwell. Hope it all works out for you. He rode off, leaving Eliza standing on the porch with fury and fear warring in her chest. He's lying, right? Clara asked quietly. About you tricking Pa? Yes, he's lying. Then why do you look scared? Because lies wrapped around truth were the most dangerous kind. Because Dutch had taken real facts and twisted them into something ugly. Because even though none of it was her fault, it looked bad from the outside. When Wade came home that evening, Eliza told him about Dutch's visit. She watched his face carefully, looking for doubt, for suspicion, for any sign he believed what Dutch had implied. Instead, Wade just looked tired. Dutch is desperate, he said. He sees me building something good, and he can't stand it, so he's trying to tear it down the only way he knows how. But what if people believe him? What if everyone starts thinking I was Eliza? Wade took her face in his hands. I don't care what Dutch says. I don't care what anyone says. I know who you are. That's what matters. You're sure? I'm sure. He kissed her forehead. Dutch has been trying to destroy me for years. This is just his latest attempt. It won't work. But Eliza wasn't convinced. The next time she went to town with Wade, she felt eyes on her everywhere, heard whispers cut off when she walked past. Mrs. Garrett served her with tight-lipped disapproval, weighing every purchase like Eliza was stealing. At the post office, she overheard two women talking. Convenient is all I'm saying. That inheritance showing up right when Wade's vulnerable, probably planned the whole thing from the beginning. Those poor children, getting another replacement mother who'll probably leave when the money runs out. Eliza left without collecting the package she'd come for, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed in public. Wade found her sitting in the wagon, staring at nothing. What happened? Nothing. I just want to go home. He didn't push, just drove them back to the ranch in silence. But that night, after the twins were asleep, he brought it up again. Tell me what's wrong. People think I'm using you. They think the inheritance is suspicious, that I'm some kind of con artist who targeted you deliberately. The words spilled out. And maybe they're right to be suspicious. Maybe it is too convenient. Maybe I should have... Stop! Wade's voice was firm,
You didn't do anything wrong. Your aunt left you money because she loved you. That's not suspicious. That's family. But I never knew her. Never even knew she existed until she died. So what? That doesn't make the inheritance less real or less deserved. He pulled her close. Dutch planted doubt in your head, and now you're doing his work for him. Don't let him win. What if you're wrong? What if marrying me ruins your reputation, the twins' future? My reputation survived my wife dying and me turning into a miserable hermit for 2 years. It can survive me marrying a woman I love. Wade tilted her chin up, making her look at him. Besides, you think too highly of my reputation. Most people think I'm strange and antisocial. You marrying me probably improves things. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. You're not that bad. I'm pretty bad. You're just too kind to say it. They sat together in the firelight, and slowly Eliza felt the doubt recede. Not disappear, she suspected Dutch's poison would linger for a while, but fade enough that she could breathe again. The week before the wedding, Tom brought news that Dutch had been arrested for cattle theft. Apparently he'd been stealing from several ranches over the winter, including Wade's, and someone had finally caught him at it. He'll be in jail through spring at least, Tom said, clearly pleased. Maybe longer if they can prove all the charges. Wade's expression was carefully neutral, but Eliza saw the relief in his eyes. One less thing to worry about, one less threat hanging over their heads. The wedding took place on a clear March morning with snow still clinging to the shadows but sunshine breaking through. They held it at the ranch, with Tom officiating. He'd gotten himself deputized as a justice of the peace years ago for occasions like this. Martha had insisted on making a cake, which leaned slightly to one side but tasted fine. The twins wore their new clothes and looked so proud Eliza's chest hurt. Old Mary showed up, grumbling about sentiment but bringing a quilt she'd sewn herself. For cold nights, she said gruffly, then added, You're good for each other. Don't mess it up. There were maybe 20 people total, neighbors, friends, the few townspeople who'd been genuinely kind. Not a big gathering, but it felt right. Felt like the beginning of something real. Wade wore his best shirt and looked uncomfortable in it. When Eliza appeared in her blue dress, his expression shifted into something that made her breath catch. Not just love, though that was there. Recognition. Like he was seeing her fully for the first time, and understanding that she was choosing this. Choosing him. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The ceremony was simple. Tom read the words, they repeated their vows, and then Wade kissed her while the twins cheered and Martha cried, and even old Mary looked suspiciously misty-eyed. You're stuck with us now, Clara announced during the celebration afterward. Good, Eliza replied. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Ben hugged her tightly. Can we call you Mama now, or is that weird? Eliza looked at Wade, who nodded slightly. You can call me whatever feels right, she told Ben. If Mama feels right, then that's what I am. Both twins latched onto her then, and Eliza held them close, this family she'd found in the most unlikely place. A widower who'd been drowning in grief. 2 children who'd learned to trust again. And herself, the auction girl who'd been terrified and desperate, and certain her life was over. Turned out it had just been beginning. The celebration lasted until evening, people finally departing as the sun set over the mountains. Martha was the last to leave, hugging Eliza hard. You did good, she whispered. Both of you. That man was dying before you came along. Now look at him. Eliza glanced over at Wade, who was showing Ben how to skip stones across the creek while Clara supervised and offered unnecessary advice. He was laughing at something Ben said, his face more open than she'd ever seen it. He did the same for me, Eliza said. We saved each other. After everyone left, the 4 of them sat on the porch watching the stars come out. The twins were exhausted but fighting sleep, not wanting the day to end. Tell us a story, Clara demanded. A good one. What kind? Eliza asked. The kind with a happy ending, where everyone gets what they deserve. So Eliza told them a story about a girl who lost everything and thought her life was over. About a man who forgot how to be happy, and 2 children who forgot how to trust. About a storm and a fever, and a moment when everything could have fallen apart, but didn't. About choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. About building a family from broken pieces and calling it home. She didn't mention that the story was theirs. The twins figured it out anyway. That's us, Ben said drowsily. We're the happy ending. We are, Wade agreed, his arm around Eliza's shoulders. We really are. Eventually, the twins fell asleep and Wade carried them inside to bed. When he came back out, Eliza was still sitting on the porch, wrapped in one of Wade's coats, looking at the ranch spread out before her. Having second thoughts? Wade asked, joining her. No, just thinking about how different everything is from a year ago.
Different good or different bad? Different miraculous. She leaned into him. I should have been destroyed by what happened to me. The auction, the shame, losing my parents, all of it should have broken me. But it didn't. No, it led me here, to you and the twins in this place. And I can't be angry about the path when I love where it ended. She paused. Does that make sense? It does. Wade was quiet for a moment. Sarah used to say that the frontier doesn't make people strong. It just shows you who was strong all along. You were always strong, Eliza. You just needed a place where that strength mattered. I wasn't strong. I was terrified.
Same thing sometimes. Bravery isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. He kissed the top of her head. You rode through a blizzard to save my children. You chose to stay when you could have left. You loved us when we weren't easy to love. That's strength. Eliza thought about the girl she'd been on that auction block, humiliated, desperate, certain she was being sold into misery. That girl would never have believed she'd end up here, married to a good man, mother to 2 children who needed her, sitting on the porch of a home she'd helped save. Life didn't follow neat narratives, didn't offer clear villains and heroes. Dutch had been arrested, but not because he was evil, just greedy and bitter and unable to let go of old grudges. Mrs. Garrett still disapproved, but she'd stopped actively trying to make Eliza's life difficult. The townspeople who'd gossiped eventually found new topics, losing interest once the scandal didn't materialize. Real life was messier than stories. People were complicated. Situations were nuanced. And sometimes terrible things led to beautiful outcomes in ways nobody could have predicted. I need to tell you something, Eliza said suddenly. All right. I don't regret the auction. I know I should. It was humiliating and awful, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. So I can't regret it. Wade was quiet for a long moment. I don't regret it either. Does that make us terrible people? Probably, but I'm okay with that. They sat together until the cold drove them inside, and even then Wade lingered in the doorway, looking back at the ranch. What are you thinking? Eliza asked. That we need to fix the porch step and replace some of the barn siding before next winter, and expand the chicken coop because Clara wants to raise more hens. He smiled slightly. Practical things, future things. Haven't thought about the future in a long time. What does that future look like? Honestly, I'm not sure, but I know you're in it. The twins are in it. The ranch keeps running. We keep working, keep building. He turned to look at her. That enough? That's everything. Spring came gradually, thawing the frozen earth and bringing new life to the ranch. Eliza used some of her inheritance money to buy better equipment, hire seasonal help, improve their livestock. Wade protested at first, proud and uncomfortable accepting what felt like charity, but Eliza pointed out that it was their ranch now, their future, and they were building it together. The twins shot up like weeds, requiring new clothes within months. Clara developed a passionate interest in horses, spending hours in the barn learning to ride properly. Ben discovered he had a talent for numbers, helping Wade track expenses and profits with unexpected accuracy. Tom and Martha became regular visitors, as did old Mary in her gruff way. Even Mrs. Garrett softened slightly, though she'd never be warm. The scandal Dutch tried to create faded into memory, replaced by new gossip about other people's lives. One evening in late May, Eliza stood in the garden she'd planted, expanded from the original with help from Martha, watching the twins chase each other through the rows while Wade worked on repairing the fence. The sun was setting, painting everything gold, and she felt a strange sensation settle over her. Peace. Not the absence of problems. They still had plenty of those. Money was tight despite the inheritance. The ranch demanded constant work. The twins tested boundaries in new and creative ways. Wade still had days where grief hit him hard, and he retreated into silence. But none of that changed the fundamental truth that they were happy. Building something together. Creating a life that felt earned rather than given. Clara ran up to her, breathless and laughing. Mama, tell Ben he has to help with the chickens tomorrow. It's his turn. Mama. The word still caught Eliza sometimes, filled her with a fierce protective love she hadn't known existed until these children called her theirs. Ben, she called, chickens tomorrow, no arguments. But no arguments means no arguments, Wade interjected, joining them. Your mother said so. Ben grumbled but agreed, and the four of them headed inside for supper. Just a normal evening, just a family doing family things. Nothing dramatic or extraordinary. And that was the point, Eliza realized. The happy ending people talked about in stories wasn't some grand finale where everything was perfect. It was this, the daily work of loving people and being loved in return. The choice to stay when leaving would be easier. The accumulation of small moments that built into a life worth living. She'd been sold at auction 18 months ago, terrified and ashamed and certain her life was effectively over. Instead, she'd found Wade and the twins and a broken ranch that needed her as much as she needed it. She'd learned that strength could look like kindness, that family could be chosen, and that sometimes the worst moments led to the best outcomes in ways nobody could predict. The frontier demanded hard people, people who could endure loss and keep going, people who could face down storms and sickness and scarcity without breaking. But it also rewarded people who refused to become hard all the way through, who kept their softness, their compassion, their ability to hope even when hope seemed foolish. Eliza had been that person without realizing it, and Wade, beneath all his grief and silence, had been that person too. They'd recognized something in each other that day at the auction. Not love, not yet, but potential. The possibility that together they might be stronger than either was alone. They'd been right. That night, after the twins were asleep and the house was quiet, Wade found Eliza on the porch again. She seemed to always end up there, drawn to the view of the ranch in darkness, the way the stars stretched overhead like promises. You're thinking loud, Wade said, settling beside her. Just thinking about how far we've come, how different everything is. You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't bid on you, if Dutch had won? Sometimes, but it doesn't matter. That's not what happened. No. Wade pulled her close. This is what happened, and I wouldn't change a single piece of it. Not even the hard parts? Especially not the hard parts. They're what made this mean something. He paused. Sarah used to say that easy love isn't real love. Real love is choosing someone even when it's difficult, even when you're tired and scared and not sure you're enough. Am I enough? Eliza asked quietly. For you? For the twins? You're everything. Wade said it simply, like stating a fact. You brought us back to life. That's more than enough. Eliza leaned against him, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, wind through the pines, the creek running its eternal course, the sounds of home. She thought about the girl she'd been, desperate, ashamed, sold like property to survive. That girl would barely recognize the woman she'd become, would be amazed that strength and stubbornness and refusing to let circumstances define her had led here, to this porch, with this man, in this life. The frontier didn't forgive mistakes, didn't offer second chances easily. People died from bad luck and worse timing. Families fell apart under pressure. Ranches failed, dreams collapsed, survival often looked like barely hanging on. But sometimes, just sometimes, desperation led to opportunity. Loss led to love. The worst day of your life became the doorway to something better than you'd imagined possible. Eliza had learned that the hard way. Had learned that being sold at auction wasn't the end of her story but the beginning. That a man broken by grief could learn to be whole again. That children who'd lost everything could learn to trust again. That a ranch barely surviving could become a home. She'd learned that family wasn't always blood. That home wasn't always where you started. That sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply staying when every instinct screamed to run. And she'd learned, most importantly, that people were remarkably resilient when given something worth fighting for. Years later, when travelers passed through Blackstone Ridge, asking directions or seeking shelter, they'd hear stories about the Mercer family, about the woman who rode through a blizzard to save children who weren't hers yet, about the widower who learned to live again, about twins who grew up strong and capable, inheriting their parents' stubbornness and their mother's fierce kindness. The stories changed in the telling, got embellished and romanticized, turned into frontier legend. But the core remained true. Sometimes strength looked like refusing to break. Sometimes love looked like choosing to stay. Sometimes family was something you built from broken pieces and called home. And sometimes, just sometimes, the auction girl became the heart of a frontier legend, not because she was perfect or extraordinary, but because she was human enough to be both scared and brave, broken and whole, lost and found. That was Eliza's truth. That was their story. Not a fairy tale with easy answers, but a real life built one difficult choice at a time, one act of courage after another, one moment of staying when leaving would have been simpler. The frontier belonged to the strong, people said. But real strength, Eliza had learned, wasn't just surviving. It was choosing to live fully, love deeply, and build something worth keeping even when the cost was high and the outcome uncertain. She'd paid that cost, made that choice. And sitting on the porch of Blackstone Ridge with Wade's arm around her and their children sleeping safely inside, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that she'd do it all again. Every hard moment, every sacrifice, every terrifying decision, because this, right here, right now, was worth everything she'd endured to get here. And that was the truest happy ending she could imagine.